do not forget to hit the notification icon. Let's dive in. Ethan was born into a Christian family. His parents loved him very much and always taught him about God. They went to church every Sunday and prayed together. Ethan watched them, but as he grew older, he started making different choices. Instead of following his parents' teachings, Ethan chose to spend his time with many different women. He went out to parties and lived a carefree life. His parents noticed and worried about him. They often told him, "Ethan, you need to stop this and give your life to God. You should think about becoming a pastor." But Ethan didn't want to listen. "That's not my life," he would reply. He wanted to live freely away from responsibilities. One day, Ethan's mother, Linda, sat him down looking very sad. "Ethan," she said with tears in her eyes, "I love you so much. If you don't change, I don't know what will happen to you. I might even harm myself. I can't bear to see you throw your life away." Ethan was shocked by her words. He loved his mother and couldn't imagine losing her. This made him think about his choices. He realized he needed to change, not just for himself, but for his family too. Reluctantly, Ethan agreed to give his life to God. His mother was relieved and grateful. "Thank you, Ethan. I knew you could find your way back," she said, hugging him tightly. After many talks and pressure from his parents, Ethan finally agreed to give his life to God and become a pastor. He opened a church, and at first, everything seemed to go well. People came to his church to listen to him speak about faith and kindness, and he felt fulfilled. His parents were proud, and Ethan was happy to see his church growing. But soon, something changed. Another man of God named Pastor Marcus opened a church nearby. Pastor Marcus's church was packed with people. He became well known for performing miracles, and many people from Ethan's church started going there instead. They heard stories of people being healed, prayers being answered, and problems disappearing. They wanted to see miracles, and Pastor Marcus's church seemed to offer that. As more and more people left, Ethan's church began to feel empty. The chairs that used to be full now sat vacant. Ethan felt disappointed and worried. He started to doubt himself and wondered if he was doing something wrong. He didn't perform miracles in his church. He simply taught about faith, love, and living a good life. One Sunday, only a few people showed up for his service. Ethan's heart sank. He could feel his confidence slipping away. He thought to himself, "Maybe I'm not a good enough pastor. Maybe people don't want to hear what I have to say." That night, Ethan sat down with his parents. Linda saw the sadness on his face and gently asked, "What's wrong?" Ethan replied, "Mom, people are leaving. They're going to Pastor Marcus's church. He performs miracles, and I don't. I feel like I'm failing." His mother listened and then said, "Ethan, remember why you started this journey. It wasn't about miracles. It was about sharing the message of love and faith. God has a plan for everyone. Trust in Him, and He will show you the way." Ethan thought deeply about her words. He realized that he had to stay true to his purpose, even if it wasn't easy. Ethan decided he wouldn't give up. Every morning, he woke up early, went out, and preached to anyone who would listen. He walked through the streets, telling people about God's love and forgiveness, hoping to bring new members to his church. One morning, as he was preaching, a woman approached him. She had once been one of his most loyal members but had left his church to join Pastor Marcus's. She looked at Ethan and shook her head. "Look at you, Pastor Ethan," she said. "You call yourself a pastor, but you don't perform any miracles. I used to go to your church, but I stopped. Your church is a waste of time, full of empty words. At Pastor Marcus's church, we see real miracles." Ethan felt hurt by her words, but he tried to stay calm. "I know Pastor Marcus's church is popular and people are drawn to miracles," he replied. "But the message of God is more than just miracles. It's about faith, love, and trust in God, even when we don't see immediate signs." The woman laughed and shook her head. "Miracles are the proof that God is present," she said firmly. "If you were really working for God, you would perform miracles too. That's why I stopped going to your nonsense church." Ethan's heart sank. He cared for his church and wanted people to feel welcome, but he knew he couldn't force anyone to stay. Even as he tried to convince her to come back, she refused. Before she walked away, she looked at him and said, "If you want people to come to your church, start showing God's power. Words aren't enough." After she left, Ethan stood there feeling defeated. The words echoed in his mind, filling him with doubt. Maybe she's right, he thought. Maybe people won't believe in my message if they don't see miracles. Feeling defeated after hearing the woman's harsh words, he went home frustrated and tired. That night, he sat with his mother and said, "Mom, I'm done. This is not the life I want. People are leaving my church. They say I don't have God's power because I don't perform miracles. No one is coming anymore." His mother looked at him with kind eyes and said, "Ethan, I know this is hard, but you need to be strong and patient. Rome wasn't built in a day. With time, your church will grow. Trust in God and don't give up." But Ethan was too upset to listen. He shook his head angrily, got up, and stormed out of the house. He walked down the lonely streets, feeling completely lost. His mind was filled with questions and doubt. He wondered if he was even meant to be a pastor. As he walked alone under the moonlight, an old man suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Ethan was startled. The man had a wise face, his hair and beard white as snow, and his eyes sparkled like he knew all the answers. "Ethan, my son," the old man said in a gentle voice, "I see you are worried. Tell me what troubles you." Ethan was shocked. He hadn't seen this man before. "Who are you?" he asked. The old man simply smiled and said, "I am here to help you. I know about your church, and I know how hard you've tried. But let me tell you something. Pastor Marcus uses special powers to heal the sick and make miracles happen. His powers don't come from faith alone. If you want to be like Pastor Marcus and have a full church, you must go the spiritual way." Ethan felt a chill down his spine. "Are you saying he uses dark powers?" he whispered. The old man nodded slowly. "Yes, Ethan. There are powers that can make miracles happen, but they are not from God. If you want to make people believe in you, you can use these powers too." Ethan shook his head firmly. "No, that goes against everything I believe. I want people to come to my church because of God's love, not because of tricks." The old man looked at him and smiled mysteriously. "I understand, but remember this, if you ever change your mind, just shout 'Great One' 3 times and I will appear. I can give you the power you desire." With that, the old man disappeared into the shadows as quickly as he had appeared, leaving Ethan alone on the dark street. Ethan walked home, deep in thought. He knew he could never use dark powers, but he also wanted his church to grow. As he lay in bed that night, he couldn't stop thinking about what the old man had said. The temptation was strong, but he knew it was wrong. "No, I won't do it," he finally said to himself. "I want to do this the right way. I'll go to Pastor Marcus in the morning and ask him to show me the way. Maybe there's something I can learn from him." Ethan felt more at peace with his decision and closed his eyes, hoping for a better tomorrow. The next morning, Ethan put on his best suit and went to see Pastor Marcus. He had decided to ask him directly how he had built his church so fast. When he arrived at Pastor Marcus's office, he greeted him politely. "Good morning, Pastor Marcus," Ethan said. "I want to be like you. I want my church to be full like yours." Pastor Marcus looked confused. "What do you mean, Ethan?" Ethan took a deep breath and said, "I know you use special powers to perform miracles. Please show me the way. Tell me how to make my church grow like yours." Hearing this, Pastor Marcus's face changed. He looked angry. "Ethan, what are you saying? I don't use any special powers. Everything I do is with the power of God. You shouldn't come here and accuse me like this." But Ethan didn't believe him. "Stop lying," he shouted. "Your church has only been open for a few months and you already have 2 branches. People say you heal the sick and make miracles happen. I know it's not just God's power. Show me the way." Pastor Marcus had enough. He stood up and pointed to the door. "Ethan, you have no faith and you don't trust God. You think miracles are just tricks. You're saying nonsense and I won't allow it in my church." Ethan felt angry and embarrassed. Pastor Marcus's words stung, but he tried one last time. "Please, Pastor Marcus, just show me how you do it." Pastor Marcus shook his head and shouted, "Get out! Don't ever come back to my church." Feeling defeated, Ethan turned and left. As he walked back, he felt ashamed and confused, wondering if he'd ever find a way to make his church grow without using the wrong path. When Ethan got back to his little office, he felt sad and frustrated. He thought about how Pastor Marcus had treated him, and how he had been so desperate to find a way to make his church grow. As he sat at his desk, he remembered the old man's words from the night before. With a mix of fear and excitement, he decided to call the old man. Great one, great one, great one, Ethan shouted. Suddenly the air around him began to shimmer, and the old man appeared with a loud laugh. His eyes sparkled with mischief. I knew you would call me, Ethan. I see you are so desperate for power. Don't worry, I will help you. But first, you must go on a journey to another world. Ethan's heart raced. Another world? What do you mean? He asked, feeling both scared and curious. The old man smiled, his beard fluttering slightly in the breeze. This world is full of secrets and magic, but it can be dangerous too. You will need to complete some rituals to gain the powers you seek. Are you ready for this journey? Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his decision. He wanted to prove himself and help his church grow, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. Yes, I'm ready, he replied. Good, the old man said. But remember, you must follow my instructions carefully. The journey will be long, and you will face challenges along the way. Only the brave can succeed. With that, the old man waved his hand, and suddenly the room around Ethan began to change. The walls melted away, and he found himself standing at the edge of a dark forest. The trees loomed high, their branches twisting like fingers reaching for the sky. A mist hung low in the air, and Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Follow the path and don't stray from it, the old man instructed. The journey will take you to the spiritual world. You will need to find 3 magical items to complete the rituals. Ethan nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. He stepped onto the path, which was narrow and winding. As he walked, strange sounds echoed around him, whispers in the wind, rustling leaves, and the distant roar of something large. After walking for what felt like hours, Ethan reached a clearing where he saw the first magical item. A shining golden feather. It floated above a small pond, glimmering in the dim light. Ethan reached out to grab it, but suddenly a shadow moved behind him. He turned quickly to see a giant, dark creature emerging from the trees. Its eyes glowed red, and it roared fiercely. Ethan's heart raced as he realized he had to act fast. He remembered the old man's words about bravery. "Leave me alone," Ethan shouted, trying to sound brave. The creature snarled but paused as if surprised by his courage. In that moment, Ethan reached for the golden feather and grasped it tightly. As soon as he held it, a warm light surrounded him, and the creature shrieked in fear, retreating back into the shadows. Breathing heavily, Ethan knew he had to keep going. He continued down the path until he reached a dark cave. Inside, he could see a glowing blue crystal on a pedestal. But as he stepped closer, he noticed that the cave was guarded by a swirling mist that whispered, "Only the true-hearted can pass." The mist hissed, "Ethan, think about your journey and how you want to help your church." He raised his chin and declared, "I want to serve God and help others." At that moment, the mist parted, allowing him to grab the crystal. The moment he touched it, he felt a surge of energy flow through him. Finally, Ethan made his way to the last stop, a high mountain where a silver chalice awaited him. As he climbed, the wind howled around him, trying to push him back. He stumbled but pressed on, determined to reach the top. When he finally reached the summit, the chalice glowed brightly. Ethan carefully picked it up, and a powerful feeling washed over him. With all 3 magical items in hand, Ethan felt a mix of fear and excitement. He knew he had completed the tasks, but still wondered what would happen next. As he turned to leave, he saw the old man waiting for him at the edge of the mountain. "You have done well, Ethan," the old man said, grinning. "Now return to your world, and you will have the power you seek. But remember, with great power comes great responsibility." With a wave of his hand, the old man opened a portal. Ethan stepped through, feeling the weight of his decisions on his shoulders. He had chosen a dangerous path, but he was determined to find a way to help his church grow. As he emerged back in his office, he held the golden feather, blue crystal, and silver chalice tightly. He knew he was about to begin a new chapter in his journey, a chapter filled with challenges and power. The next day, Pastor Ethan woke up with a strange feeling in his heart. He had completed the old man's ritual holding the golden feather, blue crystal, and silver chalice. Today, he thought, I will show people the power I now hold. He put on his best clothes and went out to preach in the streets, feeling more confident than ever. As he walked, he saw a small crowd gathering around a crippled man who couldn't walk. Ethan felt a surge of excitement. This was his chance to show the people his new power. He approached the crippled man and said, "Rise and walk." He stretched out his hand, calling on the powers he believed he had received, but nothing happened. The crippled man looked at him with confusion, and so did the crowd. They began to whisper, and soon laughter and mocking words filled the air. "Look at this fake pastor," one man shouted. "He promised a miracle, and nothing happened." Another laughed. Ethan's face turned red with embarrassment. The crowd's voices grew louder, calling him a fraud, a liar, and a fake pastor. Overwhelmed with shame, he turned and ran back to his church. His heart pounded with anger and confusion. When he finally reached his empty church, he slammed the door shut and shouted in frustration, "Great one, great one, great one!" The old man appeared before Ethan, smiling as if he'd been waiting for him. "Well, well, Ethan," he sneered. "What's wrong, Prophet Ethan?" Ethan clenched his fists, his face red with anger. "You foolish old man. You promised me power, but they didn't work. I was embarrassed out there." The old man's grin faded, and his eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone, Ethan, or I will make you blind at this very moment," he hissed. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine, but his anger kept him standing firm. The old man continued, his voice calm but dangerous. "Power comes with a price, Ethan. Did you think one sacrifice would be enough? Power is hungry, and it needs to be fed. If you want it to stay with you, you must keep feeding it." Ethan's heart sank as he realized what the old man was saying. "What do you mean?" he stammered, feeling a wave of dread. The old man's grin returned, darker and colder than before. "You need another sacrifice, Ethan, someone even closer to you." Ethan's face went pale, a chill gripping his heart. "Who?" he asked, barely able to speak. The old man's eyes gleamed with sinister joy. "Your father," he said in a barely audible whisper. Ethan's knees felt weak as he shook his head in horror. "No, not my father. I can't do that." The old man's face grew dark, his grin disappearing. "You have no choice, Ethan. You wanted power, didn't you? You wanted respect. Then do as I say. Bring your father as the next sacrifice, or everything you have built will come crashing down. People will see you as nothing more than a powerless fool." Ethan felt trapped, torn between his love for his father and his hunger for power. He thought of his father, George, who had always supported him, even when he was suspicious. The thought of harming him filled Ethan with deep sadness, but the temptation of power still clung to him, clouding his mind. The old man leaned in close. "You have 3 days, Ethan. If you do not bring your father, I will take everything from you. Your church will fall, and you will suffer. You will feel madness creep over you until you beg for mercy." With those final words, the old man disappeared, leaving Ethan alone in his office, shaking with fear and confusion. He sank into his chair, his heart pounding. He thought of the crowd outside, people who had once believed in him, now doubting his power. Yet the price of that power was now tearing his life apart. For the first time, Ethan felt truly lost, caught between his love for his family and his dangerous quest for power. Without thinking twice, Ethan did as the old man instructed. That evening, when he prepared dinner for his father, he slipped a special powder the old man had given him into the food. Ethan's heart raced, but he kept his face calm as he placed the food in front of his father. His father, George, tired after a long day, sat down at the table ready to eat. Ethan watched closely, barely breathing as his father picked up his fork. But then, just before he took a bite, his father paused, put his fork down, and bowed his head in prayer. "Dear Lord, bless this food and keep us safe. Watch over us tonight and protect us from harm," his father prayed softly. Ethan felt a jolt of fear. What if my father's prayer was strong enough to stop the powder from working? He tried to push the thought away, but as his father ate, he began to worry. After dinner, his father seemed unusually tired. Ethan watched as he yawned, rubbed his eyes, then slowly got up and went to his room to sleep. This must be it, Ethan thought. By morning, it will all be over. That night, Ethan could hardly sleep. He tossed and turned, imagining the power he would gain and the respect he would finally have. But as morning came, his excitement turned to nervousness. What if something went wrong, he thought. As he sat in the living room, still half expecting bad news, he suddenly heard footsteps down the hall. His heart stopped. Slowly, he turned his head toward the sound, and to his shock, he saw his father walking toward him, looking perfectly fine and cheerful. "Good morning, Ethan," his father said with a smile, stretching and yawning. Did you sleep well? Ethan's mouth fell open, and he couldn't speak for a moment. His mind raced. How was this possible? I was certain the powder would work. Good morning, Dad, Ethan managed to say, trying to hide the shock on his face. His father didn't seem to notice anything strange. He simply poured himself a cup of tea, humming to himself, completely unaware of Ethan's panic. Ethan felt his heart pounding, his mind spinning. Had the powder failed, or had his father's prayer protected him somehow? Ethan returned to his secret office, heart pounding and mind racing. He stood in the dim light and called out, "Great one, great one, great one!" The old man appeared, his shadowy figure looming before Ethan, his smile wide but not reaching his eyes. "Ah, Ethan, you've summoned me again. What troubles you now?" the old man asked. Ethan's voice trembled with urgency. "My father is still alive. I followed your instructions, but the powder didn't work. What must I do to gain the power I desire?" The old man's expression turned serious as he leaned closer. "Your father's spirit is stronger than I anticipated. He has a deep faith that protects him," he said. "Then what can I do?" Ethan pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. "If you truly want the power you seek, you must give up something even more valuable." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean?" he stammered, already feeling a sense of dread. The old man's eyes glinted with a cold, calculated look. "Your manhood, Ethan. The ultimate sacrifice." Ethan's face went pale, his body stiffening in shock. "My manhood?" he whispered, barely able to get the words out. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. "Yes," the old man replied, his voice calm and steady. "This is the price of true power. Are you willing to pay it?" Ethan felt dizzy, his mind racing. "This is too much, too far. The thought of losing such an important part of myself makes me feel weak." But he also remembered his hunger for power, for respect, and for all the things he thought he deserved. Ethan made the decision to go ahead with the sacrifice. He felt a mix of fear and excitement as he prepared for what was to come. The old man guided him through the dark ritual, and with a swift and painful process, Ethan lost his manhood. It was a heavy price to pay, but as the days passed, he began to feel different, powerful. Soon after the sacrifice, Ethan's church started to grow rapidly. People came from all over to see the miracles he performed. The story spread quickly, and he opened a new branch of his church in a nearby town. Ethan was thrilled as he stood before large crowds, preaching confidently and performing what he claimed were miraculous healings. He felt like a true prophet. One Sunday, after a particularly busy service, Ethan's father, George, came to visit him at the church. He looked around in awe, amazed at how successful Ethan had become. "Son, you've done so well for yourself," he said with pride. "Your church is thriving. Why don't you think about getting married? A family would make your life even more fulfilling." Ethan smiled politely but shook his head. "No, Dad. The Lord has not revealed the right woman for me yet," he replied, trying to sound convincing. Inside, he felt a twinge of doubt. Was it really the Lord's will, or was it just his own fear of attachment? His father nodded, though a look of concern crossed his face. "You know, having someone by your side can bring joy and strength. It's important to have love in your life." Ethan brushed off his father's words. "I have my church, and that is my focus right now. I need to continue my work and spread the message." As the weeks went by, the church continued to grow, and Ethan enjoyed the admiration of his followers. Yet, late at night, when the crowds had gone home and silence filled the church, he sometimes felt lonely. Despite his success, there was a part of him that wondered if he had made the right choices. But every time those thoughts crept in, he pushed them away, reminding himself of the power he now possessed and the respect he had earned. He was determined to stay focused on his mission, even if it meant sacrificing love and companionship. After all, he had paid a high price for his power, and he wasn't about to let it go. One day, as Ethan was greeting members after a Sunday service, his eyes fell on a young woman named Grace. She was kind, dedicated to the church, and always eager to learn more about faith. Ethan felt an immediate connection to her, something he hadn't felt in a long time. As weeks passed, Ethan and Grace started spending more time together, talking after services and even meeting outside of church. Ethan felt truly happy in her presence and realized he was falling in love. He couldn't remember the last time he felt so close to someone, and Grace's warmth made him feel alive in a way that preaching and miracles never had. Eventually, Grace noticed Ethan's growing affection, and soon they began dating. She loved how dedicated Ethan was to his church and respected his commitment. However, one day, as they were talking, she brought up the topic of intimacy. She looked at him with a shy smile and said, "Ethan, we're in love. Don't you think we should take the next step in our relationship?" Ethan quickly cleared his throat. He looked into her eyes and said, "Grace, I believe in doing things the right way. I think we should get married before taking that step." Grace respected Ethan's faith and commitment and agreed, thinking it was because he was a man of God. She smiled and nodded. "All right, Ethan, I'll wait. I admire your faith." Ethan felt relieved and grateful that she understood. But deep down, he knew there was more to his hesitation. He felt the weight of the secret he was hiding, a truth that could change everything if Grace ever found out. Just 2 months after Ethan and Grace were married, Ethan's father, George, couldn't hide his excitement. One evening, as they all sat together after a family dinner, his father leaned over with a warm smile. "Ethan, my son," he began, "I can't wait to carry my grandchildren. It will be such a joy for me to see the next generation." Ethan forced a smile, nodding. "Me too, Dad. I look forward to starting a family with Grace." Grace, seated beside him, reached over and squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with joy and hope for the future. She too dreamed of having children, filling their home with laughter and love. But as Ethan spoke, a pang of worry stirred in him, knowing the truth he hadn't shared. Weeks turned into months, and Grace started to feel a quiet worry growing inside her. Since they had been married, Ethan had not once made any move toward intimacy. At first, she thought it was just a part of his strong faith, or perhaps he was waiting for a special moment. But as time went on, her patience turned into confusion, and her confusion into insecurity. One evening, Grace decided to confront him. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts, and went to Ethan as he sat in his study. "Ethan," she began softly, "I need to understand something. Why haven't we shared any intimate moments? We're married now. Is there something wrong?" Ethan paused, caught off guard by her question. He looked at her with a forced calmness and replied, "The Lord has not given me the instruction to take that step yet, Grace. We have to be patient and follow His guidance." Grace tried to smile, but Ethan's answer left her feeling more confused than before. As she returned to her room that night, her mind raced with thoughts and questions. She looked at herself in the mirror, wondering if there was something wrong with her. "Was I not attractive enough?" she thought. All her thoughts do not matter again. Perhaps it's all